Hi there. What follows is the RE0 segment from yesterday's Casual Monday video. If you already watched that, there is nothing new for you here. But since I already have a number of videos in this series, I wanted to break it out so they could all live in a little playlist together. Here's that segment then. RE0 Season 3. Especially thanks to the extra long premiere, there is a ton already to talk about in the new season. We've been covering it in streams as well, so I have been immersed in a whole lot of chatter and speculations and observations, so much so that I can abandon any attempt to be exhaustive. So I'm going to talk about maybe 40% of the things I thought are particularly worth pointing out, and then the rest of them in next week's Casual Monday, and then an episode at a time as they release, now and in the winter continuation. The first is the new character Liliana. I know we haven't heard much from her outside the opening, but she seems to have some vague kind of power, and there are two parts to what we have seen so far. The first is more obvious, that she seems to have some kind of influence over people with her music. Kiritaka is smitten with her, it's the first thing we're even told about him, but once we see the songstress in action, it appears to be more than just a case of an admiring fan. When she plays for Subaru in their first meeting, he will join in halfway through, even able to produce lyrics and harmonize despite it being a song newly created. We'll later see Priscilla, of all people, dancing to her tune quite literally. And when Liliana refuses Priscilla's offer to become her personal singer, Subaru and Emilia and Betty and the audience all brace for how Priscilla will react. But she doesn't lash out, or denigrate, or fume, or anything that we'd be inclined to expect. She's gracious, even commends Liliana for her impressive faith, even tries to teach her how to wink, though with no ready success. We also see that Liliana plays for the whole town via the broadcast media, and people everywhere stop and listen, pleasantly smiling along, as she's like a bard archetype in an RPG with an ability to charm. Considering how downright lousy this world is with divine blessings and protections, I am not going to be shocked to learn that she is walking around with one of them. Now, introducing this musical magical influence in the same episode where we see Sirius's power certainly invites us to compare them, and we'll get to Sirius later. But Liliana seems to have another, more subtle thing going on. If the music playing is charm, then this other power I would call inspiration. She seems to pull things from the aether to come up with her near-instant new songs, and they might relate to the people around her. When Subaru first encounters her, he interrupts her by calling out the horrible lyrics, but when we take a closer look at them, they could easily be about Subaru himself. I wander with no destination, no money, no future, no dreams even. All I have is my pride. I'm just a pathetic person. There's also the bit where she asks Subaru to go get them some snacks, and then repeats herself, refusing to move forward. And Subaru highlights this in his otaku way, comparing it to a choose-your-own-adventure where he can't move on without saying yes. When that exact moment ends up being the return-by-death reset point, though, suddenly we should look at her behavior a little more closely. Did she fix on that request out of some instinctual hunch? Did she detect whatever it is that determines the thresholds of Subaru's power? I don't imagine she understands what she's doing. It probably literally seems like creative inspiration to her, but some kind of plucking the truth out of the air appears to be the pattern. Assuming such, there's one thing she says that I really want to pay attention to. Just before they go to meet Kiritaka, she will make a comment about her way, and talks about weighing honor against empathy on the scales, and then shattering them. Even then, we talked about the possibility of Tiefin being involved in the story because of that line, as judging others was her shtick, and shattering them her method. But the other part I really am interested in is that weighing of honor against empathy. One of the things the premiere seems to promise is an increased focus on Julius and Reinhard and their positions as knights. Specifically, Reinhard's situation of supporting Felt, being estranged from Wilhelm, and in contention with his father, who is his superior officer. And then, similarly, Julius's conversation with Subaru, where he admits that he wanted to react in one way, but his duty demands he do otherwise. The idea of honor, in their case perhaps the behavior prescribed to them by being Knights of Lagunica, will contend with empathy, understanding how that behavior impacts or is received by others. I fully expect that they will be presented with bad outcomes that are technically expected of them against good outcomes that are what they really want. Indeed, Reinhard might already be in that situation with Heinkel's hostage-taking of Felt. We already know that he will bend if he can on a technicality, such as way back at the beginning when he admits that officially he cannot overlook what Felt and Romji have done, but unfortunately he's off duty, though he does end up taking her for a completely different reason. And so let's talk about Felt. Two things in particular. One is that it increasingly seems like she might be the kidnapped royal from 15 years prior, the one who Wilhelm tried to recover, which led to the conditions for Teresia's death and the falling out between grandfather and grandson. Way back in episode 3, it seemed obvious Reinhard was trying to figure out if Felt was someone in particular after seeing the insignia respond to her touch. He wants to know her age and her family name, and learning that she thinks she's 15 does not dissuade his persistence. He will say that the matter of the stolen insignia is trivial in comparison to the gravity of overlooking the crime unfolding before him. Later on, Subaru will run across Romji and catch him up on this event, and he'll muse that it just had to be in Austria. That certainly suggests that Felt is more than she appears, and that Romji knows so. When we add all that to the story of the kidnapping that Julius tells Subaru, we even wonder if Romji was involved in the plot. After all, he knew how to sneak into the heavily guarded throne room when he attempted to steal her out of the royal selection. But certainly, we now understand Reinhard's determination. The kidnapped royal and the fallout had a major impact on his family. If he has found said royal and can restore them, then I imagine he believes that much that was wrong will be put right. But not so fast, Reinhard. The other thing to mention about Felt is what she wants. While Reinhard tries and tries to turn the street kid into a princess, she is in turn trying to change her knight into someone who acts on what he wants, rather than presenting as the person he believes he is supposed to be. I think Felt in this year they've spent together has got him pretty well pinned down, and this synergizes with what I said earlier about weighing honor against empathy. Even in the predicament with Heinkel holding her at sword point, I am unconvinced that she is actually so helpless. I mean, we saw her contend with Elsa way back, and she has the divine protection of wind to boot. I won't be surprised if she is intentionally testing Reinhard by playing along. Speaking of honor, there is a kind of warrior honor ritual that plays out at times in the series, and one that got a little twist in the 4th episode. What I refer to is the giving of one's name. For whatever reason, the Sin Archbishops introduce themselves in encounters, whether by custom or because it terrorizes people, I'm unsure. Regulus will get downright hostile if you do not return in kind. But we also see it among warriors about to do battle. Reinhard and Elsa exchange their names before their fight, and Elsa does it again with Garfield in the 2nd season. This past episode, though, we got a warning from Al, telling Subaru specifically to not give his real name to the Archbishop of Gluttony. Since we know the eating of names is what creates a situation like Rem's, I have to imagine this is why he gives such advice. But what stands out to me is that this perverts the honorable exchange of names. Their insistence on introducing themselves, and especially Regulus demanding the same in return, is setting people up for gluttony. They are twisting something that is meant as a show of respect into a weapon. They do the same thing with love, but I suspect that may end up being a huge through line in the series, and so we'll have to give it more space at a future date. For right now, I wanted to mention Sirius's version. I was particularly fond of how they introduced her power, right at the end of that long premiere. The scene drags on and on with her just being conciliatory and saying nothing of meaning, and it starts to strain credibility that these people keep giving her the time of day. And at some point, the wrongness of the scene finally boils over, and we realize we're seeing some kind of power at work. And from there, it's just wondering what in the world it's all building toward. And what a doozy it was, too. Linking everyone's fates together by making their emotions synchronize and feedback off one another. It was a deeply unpleasant hysteria to witness, and the head-splitting punctuation mark to it all was quite the introduction for our new Archbishop. A few more loops fill out a little more of our understanding of her power, and then we get a completely different encounter once Emilia comes on the scene. Sirius recognizes her, and suddenly she seems like she represents wrath indeed. She gave her name as Sirius Romana Conti, the same as Betelgeuse, and her ire towards Emilia seems to come from a place of intense jealousy. While we can kind of figure out that her marriage to Betelgeuse might only exist in her own mind, it's reason enough to want to kill the half-elf that Juice was so obsessed over. The thing I wanted to note is that Sirius assaults Emilia with words as well as weapons, insulting her features. Ironic, since it seems plain that Sirius must look similar, with the same eyes, silver hair, and pointed elf ears under those bandages. But I bring it up because of how Emilia reacts. She says, "My eyes, my voice, and my silver hair are all things the person I love praised," and further, that Sirius insulting them makes her angry. This is a change from the Emilia who used to be so self-conscious about her features. They'd earned her nothing but scorn because of the resemblance to Satila, and she used to hide herself when possible. Being praised by a loved one, though, has changed her orientation to this part of herself. We can perhaps extrapolate, then, that she has not been hiding herself or going in disguise of late. Certainly she has not done so during the third season so far, and I thought that was a neat bit of implied growth on her part. Now, unfortunately, Emilia ends that episode by potentially becoming a damsel in distress when Regulus announces he's claiming her as his 79th wife. I have some things I want to say about Regulus, but since I think he'll be in the 5th episode, I'm going to save them. Instead, I just want to comment on the possibility of Emilia as damsel in distress. It's not a trope I love, and since she's pretty capable, I'm not sure that'll actually be how this plays out. However, it strikes me that Regulus's behavior towards Emilia might end up serving the purpose of holding a mirror up to Subaru's own. Regulus has designated her as his, and taken it upon himself to protect her, and begins making plans for their future, and does all of it without a single bit of input from Emilia herself. In fact, he didn't even know her name was Emilia. I'm struck by how much that situation echoes Subaru's own at the story's beginning, right down to not even learning her real name until the end of the 3rd episode. I'm really interested to see where the next episode takes this particular thread. We'll finish this by mentioning our 2 newest introductions, Capella Emerata Lagunica Chansama and Roy Alfard, who apparently is also the Archbishop of Gluttony, along Lai Batankatos that we had already met. Like every archbishop so far, these are all star names. Capella is a star in the Auriga constellation, the charioteer, and the star name itself means little goat. Batankatos is a star in the Cetus constellation, the whale, something I have mentioned in a past video. He is the one who referred to the white whale as his pet. Now that there is another gluttony archbishop kicking around, Roy Alfard, we seem to have a pattern. There are 3 great maw beasts, the white whale, the black serpent, and the great rabbit. Roy's last name is Alfard, which is a star in the Hydra constellation. If Lai maps to the white whale, then Roy here must map to one of the other 2, in theory. Hydra might suit the black serpent, and what I would think of readily, but the mythological Hydra also replaced lost heads with 2 new ones, a replication feat that makes me think of the great rabbit as well. What we can assume, though, is that the presence of Roy and Lai suggests there will be a 3rd gluttony archbishop as well. If Roy maps to the black serpent, then we might expect the 3rd constellation to be Lepus, the hare, whose brightest star is named Arneb. If this is the pattern, then we might meet another archbishop with that as their last name. If Roy maps to the rabbit, though, then perhaps the 3rd constellation will be Serpens, whose brightest star is named Eunuchelhe. Eunuchelhe, that's it. And that will be the new name. Our gluttony archbishops use first-person plural to refer to themselves, Oretachi and Bokutachi. But what does this mean? Is this one person with multiple personalities, switching names and attire? Is it 3 distinct people who are linked in some way? Or are they like the white whale, which could create 2 copies of itself but had a main body? All of these seem equally possible to me in this particular story universe. We know Lai was able to erase people from memories, the same as the whale. If these are separate people, will their powers then also mirror their respective maw beast? Coming back to our Archbishop of Lust, finally, I'm amused by the picture her introduction paints, referring to herself as Lagunica Chan-sama. Giving herself honorifics by itself is suggestive of arrogance, but she seemed to want both the cuteness of Chan and the reverence of Sama, and so went for both. But, perhaps in character, if she is actually the former royal who shares the non-star part of her name. Since the royal family of Lagunica had a contract with a dragon as their whole shtick, and indeed, finding candidates to resume that contract is the major storyline so far, it's maybe only slightly shocking to find her so, dragony. As wild as the archbishops have all been, they at least have all been human form. Capella here seems to have a human form too, if it's the same person who made the first announcement. You can briefly see that she has sharp canines, and so is perhaps like some of our transforming demi-humans. What I confess I'm more curious about is whatever was happening during the broadcast that caused everyone to hold their ears in pain. Does it have anything to do with all the weird xenomorph egg sac things all over the ground? Or is that some other horror that is the handiwork of our two atypical cultists? So many things happened all at once there, the characters didn't even get to process much about them, and Capella trundles off after a demonstration of her regenerative powers. In fact, she didn't actually do anything except taunt them and leave, come to think of it. The reason I bring it up is that we should expect her to have an authority of some kind, and we have had demonstrations of all the other ones. Was the sound in the broadcast that authority? Or is it the egg things? Or are they the same thing? We appear to be weaving quite the Gordian knot of crises through 4 episodes. Chaotic is how things feel so far. We're not even sure which things are yet set in stone, if Subaru's reset point has moved up or not. Though I suspect that the circumstance at the end of the 3rd episode is probably fixed, if you made me guess. I'm beginning to suspect that the first half of Season 3 is only going to be about laying out all the complications and obstacles, perhaps with none of them resolved or advanced. Anyway, there's a lot more to talk about, like Garfield and Mimi and his mother, Betty, Regulus, and the Austria family drama, but I didn't want this first Casual Monday to be 2/3 just RE0 stuff, so we'll continue to talk about all the new episodes next week as well.